Welcome back everyone, I'm Michael, and today we're going to be taking a look at a post that was originally created in the r/marriage subreddit by user the Machuca Jr. But just an FYI, we will use the repost version by user Shark Ava as the visual for you guys. The post itself is titled, "My wife friendzoned me and wants a platonic companionship." My wife and I, both 35, have been married for 15 years and we've been together for 20 years. We have 2 kids, ages 12 and 14. We absolutely adore and work tirelessly to provide the best possible life for them. For the past 3 years, things have been somewhat bumpy. I understand that our kids are at an age where they require a ton of our attention and resources with school, band, club sports, and other extracurriculars, and I'm aware of the physical and emotional toll that can have on marriages. However, for these past 3 years, my wife and I have had very little intimacy and very little, and we've been trying very hard to work on that aspect of our relationship. This past year has been the most difficult and by far the darkest year in our marriage. We didn't talk very much. We essentially became roommates co-parenting our kids under the same roof. It was very depressing and very demoralizing. It was to the point where we began contemplating divorce, and it became very dark and gloomy in the household because of that. We began seeking help with both individualized therapy and couples therapy, and it seems to have helped some. Little by little, we started to get along and started to have deeper conversations about what our marriage looks like and what we would love for it to look like. This is where it gets tough. As time passed, my wife started to tell me she no longer was in love with me, and that she only saw me as a best friend, that she only loved me in a very platonic way, and this was one of the main reasons she didn't have any desire for intimacy and let alone sex. This was very shocking to me, and quite frankly, I was devastated. I was angry and depressed, and I couldn't fathom the thought that I was no longer wanted or desired by the person I felt completely in love with. Things began to deteriorate again, and not long after, we were back to square one. I sat down with her one afternoon and had a heart-to-heart, and began to ask questions about where the root of this problem lies. And her answer was, "I don't know," and that I have built up resentment towards you, but I don't know where it stems from. As you can imagine, this provides very little to no insight into how to approach this. I'm puzzled, I'm frustrated, and I do not know what to do at this point. Currently, we've arrived at a place where she says that she has no drive and no desire for intimacy or connection. She says that all she wants is simply companionship, which basically means our co-parenting roommate dynamic. I asked her what I could possibly do or what it is about me that was so unattractive or undesirable, and her response was always, "I don't know." She stated that she does love me, but it's not the same, that she has been feeling disconnected for years, and that our marriage just takes up too much work. Her focus is only on the children for now, and my parenting contributions are meaningful to her in our home. I'm at a loss, and I'm mainly venting about my frustration. It's tough to realize that the person you love has no feelings for you. I feel like at this point, I'm only here to contribute financially and as a parent. I feel like what she means with companionship is that she's comfortable with the convenience of having a good father for our kids and my financial contribution to the household. In regard to intimacy and or sex, she basically told me that it's not something she's interested in or wants at this time. She mentioned that the only way to get to a point for any of that is to be intoxicated, which I believe is incredibly awful and very wrong. I told her I do not think forcing herself to have sex or be intimate by drinking or smoking is good, and I declined to be a part of that, which to my surprise, it upset her and made her more distant. We're both extremely honest and transparent. We've never cheated on each other, and we are always free to look through each other's phones, emails, socials, etc. And we hardly ever do. I asked her if there was someone else and she declined. Honestly, I believe her. We then peacefully went through each other's things, and as expected, it was clean. We've always been very forward, even with the hard topics, so I don't smell nor feel any foul play or infidelity. Am I wrong for declining to only be intimate or have sex when she's intoxicated? I do not know how to help our situation, and I'm starting to become a bit anxious and desperate. We're both fairly young and healthy individuals and good looking. We both have good standing careers and are good parents. I'm just not sure how our lives could have driven us to this point. I'd love some outside perspective on this matter and some insight on how to address something like this. It feels so awful to be unwanted and undesired by my own spouse. I hate it. TLDR, my wife of 15 plus years is no longer in love with me and doesn't know a way, and now says she can only have sex while intoxicated or I need to settle for a platonic marriage, and she doesn't know why that is, but it is what it is, and I'm in need of insight or advice. User SharkAva included several comments from the original thread that were pretty notable. The first one being from a user named warthog_. From your comment history, it looks like you guys are swingers. If so, that would be relevant information to consider. OP responded with the following: "We did some swinging in the past. That was fun for some time. We mutually decided to stop doing it, and we have established it's not the case. When we were swinging, however, our marriage seemed to be in a good place. This is something we did disclose with our couples therapist and made sure to include it to make sure we're not neglecting an obvious potential issue. I will say I did ask my wife if what she experienced during swinging is something that is affecting her view on our relationship, and she said it wasn't. Our swinging experience was always together, and it was very driven. Nothing really emotional or poly. The truth is, I have to believe her at her word. I have no reason to distrust her. To date, she's always been very forward and never afraid of dealing with things head on, no matter how painful." User Failed Opportunity said, "It's an obvious potential issue, bro. Whether it be she's enjoying herself as a side piece and wants nothing to do with you in that manner anymore, or she just went along with you on the swinging and never wanted to do it in the first place. Hence, it brings resentment. Regardless, should have been included in the initial post." OP made the following comment: "Swinging was her idea, not mine. But I suppose I should have included it, but I honestly believe her on it not being an issue. I don't have any reason to distrust her. Maybe it's something she has to accept with her own therapist, or our couple's therapist. Can't really approach that with a solution if she doesn't think it was a problem. I don't know." Then user Big Iron Bruce said this in regards to OP's comment about basically being roommates. That's only a marriage if you both agree it is. You're hoping she's going to wake up one day and feel different, but she's basically said that's not going to happen and doesn't want to figure out why she feels that way. It seems like you tried several different ways to get to the bottom of it, and she's either deflected or is being honest that she's not in love with you. Big Iron Bruce made another comment about the part where OP's wife offered if she was intoxicated. "I wouldn't do this either if that makes you feel better. Will she be your best friend if you live elsewhere and have a relationship with somebody and love you? Probably not." Which makes the whole best friend speech feel like self-deception on her part. "I won't lie, if it were me, I'd get a divorce. She doesn't seem willing to do the work to fix the marriage, and you can't fix it alone. She might promise to fix it or beg you not to, but you need to follow your gut as to whether she actually can or will fix it. She's serious that she wants you to stick around, but not necessarily as her husband." OP said that this was a very hard truth to accept. User Interesting Tip 4850 said you may still consider the 180 method to protect yourself, and perhaps at the same time, the reality that the ship is leaving may start to change your wife's perspective. If that doesn't, what else would? OP didn't know what the 180 method was and asked the commenter to elaborate. Interesting Tip said this and linked an article. Basically, withhold from any unnecessary interactions and affection. This is from an infidelity forum, but the principles are the same. OP responded that he would heavily consider this approach. Then about a week later, OP returns to Reddit and provides an update. "I wanted to give you guys an update of how the therapy session with my wife went this week. Not sure if this is helpful or not, but I took many of the responses, comments, and suggestions from my initial post and put together some things I wanted to discuss with our couples therapist to help us navigate some of the core issues that may be affecting this situation. One of the main things that is the buzzword of this has been the term resentment, and it has been really eating me up inside knowing my wife keeps telling me she doesn't know why she's resentful or doesn't know why this is affecting her emotionally/mentally. I brought this up with our therapist once again and resurfaced the conversation about being married for so long and being together since we were 14 years old. Our long history of growing up and how having children when she was 19 years old significantly changed the trajectory of our lives. We experienced severe poverty and many hardships in the process, and we essentially had zero social life for the past 10 years because we were so busy raising babies, 2 kids now ages 12 and 14. She followed up with tons of questions directly, mostly at my wife, about her feelings towards this, and 90% of the responses were very our kids focused. It definitely felt like she was afraid of saying, yes, it sucked, because she would feel guilt or shame because it would imply she regrets the kids. I mentioned this in the session, and the therapist encouraged her to look at this outside of the lens of being a mother and to try to view it a bit more selfishly and individually, and it revealed a lot. My wife mentioned that she was very frustrated with the fact that we did miss out on many things in life. She also was very clear in saying, "I do not think I missed out on other partners or dating or partying, but I certainly lost all my friends." This was huge because one of the big pieces that have caused a strain in our lives is how isolated we've been. Again, busy raising the kids. I followed up by reminding her that it's important to have good friends and to make time for herself and her friendships. For the past 3+ years, we've had multiple conversations about friends and how it is important to have them in life, especially when you have similar peers that can help in many areas of life that perhaps you have no experience navigating, and even simply for enjoyment. It has always been something my wife avoids, even though she's always been someone who needs external stimuli. The main reason for her not investing in friends or even herself has always been the kids. Like I mentioned earlier in this post, 90% of the answers have to relate to the kids to some degree. At this point in our session, I started to feel like there was a common denominator in most of the frustrations and problems she was experiencing, that being the kids. So I simply asked her, "Do you think you may be upset at me because I'm responsible for these kids in the sense that I got you pregnant so young?" I wasn't ready, but she said that she was upset at me for that. She also followed up with the fact that she knows that's unreasonable because it takes two to tango. I did feel like it was progress because it kind of gave us something to work on and help alleviate some of these burdens, so we agreed to invest more time in nurturing good friendships both together and individually. Toward the end of the session, we began to discuss what actionable items we would take from this session. At this point, it was still very ambiguous and blurry as to what the outcomes were. I was very direct and very forward in asking my wife what her plan was moving forward. Note, I had decided prior to the session that should my wife say the same thing about being a co-parenting roommate, I would take the 180 approach and essentially do me. She started basically saying the same thing, that she doesn't have any desire to be intimate or sexual with me. As of now, she loves me immensely, and she feels bad for not being there for me. I also brought up the brief swinging that happened, to which, for the 50th time, said it wasn't a problem. I agree with her on this. This was something that was a mechanical approach for a solution to a problem that was very much non-existent when we tried this. We both really have no issue with this. We know it happened, we tried it, and mutually stopped and turned the page. I also brought up other life events that may cause resentment, and really we ended up not getting anywhere else as far as the root for resentment, which was discouraging. I then basically expressed to my wife that I would not be okay with that arrangement. I told her that I've really done everything I can and that this issue really has reached a point where it has nothing to do with me or require me to do anything that I'm currently not doing. I was very direct and said that I will not be accepting this dynamic and that I need to be with someone who is actively involved in our marriage, works towards resolutions, and is very much interested in maintaining an active intimacy and relationship. I expressed how I was not going to be a convenience and that there was more to life than being roommates and co-parents. I made sure she knew I loved her dearly and that I did want this to work for the better. I also told her that I'm fully committed to this marriage so long as she is as well, and that if she wasn't, it's okay. However, I will not be a part of something where these efforts are not reciprocated. I told her I had no plans of leaving and I did not want a divorce. However, I made it clear that if this dynamic continued, divorce would be the only outcome. Of course, tears were involved, and it was a very bleak and sad ending to the session. Still, nothing was said, and I walked out very discouraged and very determined to start working on the 180 as soon as we left the room. It's painful and very difficult because much of the 180 requires you to be very short, cold, and transactional. The saddest part is realizing that this dynamic is already very cold and transactional. Here is where it gets very interesting. I started working on implementing many of the 180 recommendations that same day. I mentioned to my wife, hey, things are going to be a bit different moving forward. I'm going to honor her roommate/parent dynamic without reproach, and it should be no mistake that I am not happy here and I am never going to be okay with it, but I am done working on it if she wasn't going to work on it. She agreed and went to bed. I started to build distance and started to basically focus on myself, very short and transactional. She asked for help on some of her personal things, to which I declined, and it really shocked her. She was upset, saying I was being petulant. I explained to her that she is now fully in charge of her own life and her own issues. We didn't talk all day and we only spoke when necessary. A few days I keep this going and she's very visibly upset and stressed. I typically react to that with gestures of help or nurturing, but I didn't this time. That night she was crying, telling me she was stressed and she thought something was wrong with me because I was indifferent. I simply listened and then I told her that this is the dynamic she proposed and that I'm simply taking care of myself and focusing on myself, just like her. I'm not gonna lie, it has been very hard to be cold and distant because, as I mentioned before, I love her and I wish I could hold her and love on her. However, I know this is somewhat manipulative in a way just to get her way and still keep me in the friend zone, so I've been staying the course. We're now going on a week of this 180, and let's just say there have been many changes on her side. I think she is starting to realize there is more to me than just friends and co-parenting. I sent her a text a few days ago, essentially itemizing bills and separating the financial responsibilities 50-50, and she lost her shit. She basically told me it was out of left field, to which I responded, hey, friends go in 50-50 and as your friend, I expect nothing less. This was very eye-opening because it gave me a glimpse of how I'm really taken for granted, and how her level of comfort and convenience at my expense is really overlooked. I pushed through anyway and basically told her that this is the new dynamic she asked for and that it's still a bargain because she would have to be 100% if she was on her own. While the 180 has been working in many different areas, I am still very much sad about the overall situation. There have been many eye-opening statements being said and realizations that have not been pleasant to encounter. It has also sparked new energy and new efforts on her side as well. She's definitely seeking to talk to me more often, and while it's hard to turn down, I hope if things improve, this continues to happen. I've also noticed that she's making more time for herself aside from being a mom, which is huge because she neglected herself for years. I'm very pleased seeing her be more herself. My hope is that as we work on ourselves, the marriage improves. There really is no telling at this point where this will go. We are very cordial and amicable even to this day, and that's a very good sign. Boundaries are set and expectations are very clear, and I feel that no matter the outcome, I will be at peace with everything that has been done. We're still going to continue the couples therapist until we either rekindle our marriage or end up in divorce. I feel like having this non-biased third party really helps as a witness and as a guide through this. No matter what, I will always love my wife. However, I will not participate in a intimate-less marriage because we both deserve better. Thank you all for all the kind words and recommendations and feedback. This will be my last post on this topic and I wish you all the best. TLDR, my wife friend-zoned me and wants to just co-parent at my expense, but I started the 180 method to try and find a solution because she doesn't want to work on us, which seems to be working on getting her out of her rut and helping me discover more about how she feels. Also, therapy is paramount and highly recommended to all couples. User Complete Old 1960 made this comment under the update post. The bottom line is not to be brutal, but there is one thing you don't have an infinite amount of, which is time. This has to be resolved in a timely manner. It takes two to be in love and to be loved, and you only have half of the equation. You need to put a time limit on you being the good guy and think of you and your future. Look, I hope it works out for you, but listening to what you are going through and what you could be in for, you can still be a good father, but also be a great husband to another wife if you find that special person again. OP said, definitely. I think this soft ultimatum has been very revealing. I'm definitely hoping for a rekindling of our marriage, but I'm also bracing for divorce. I agree on a timeline, and I've decided on a timeline for myself privately. I don't want to give her a timeline because I want to reduce the pressure. However, after 1 to 2 years, if things don't improve, it won't be shocking or a surprise if we split. I think 1 to 2 years is more than reasonable. Another Reddit user named She's a Killer also made a comment. I have to agree with this simply because at some point, the person who has gone 180 and is waiting for the other person to decide will begin to wonder, wow, they're really taking their time coming around to me. Did they love me at all? If they ever appreciated and cared for me, why would they keep me waiting and neglecting me for so long? Except in my case, it had more to do with the other person being stubborn and unable to admit their faults. OP said, yeah, I understand. I don't think I'll ever doubt she loved me at all. I am certain she did, and I'm certain she still does. I know it sounds crazy, and I'm not at all infatuated or blinded by love. Love is far more than the intimacy and sex aspects were lacking. Then user RandyPan the Goat Boy said, I think it's interesting that in the comments of your original post, you said you didn't think she was taking you for granted, but you came to realize she absolutely was. Can you give some more details on what the 180 method is? OP said, yeah, I definitely felt this way, but with this 180 method, it's happening right in front of my eyes. Actual actions and reactions taking place that clearly demonstrate that she is taking me for granted. She actually sees this as well. It's evident she's thinking about this heavily based on her demeanor and her behavior. It's very important to understand the wife's point of view. As we have seen, she seemed to want to almost leech on her husband. She had been keeping a lot of anger inside of her with the regret of having kids at 19 years old. And it's understandable, but nevertheless, those feelings can't excuse just checking out of a marriage so suddenly. But I'm glad to hear that OP seems to be getting along with his wife now and is making good progress.